Welcome everybody to the ITESOFT webinar. Thank you for taking time to join us today. Very much appreciate that. We still do have some people who are joining on at the moment, so we'll just take a few more seconds for them to come on board. Just as a reminder, while they're coming on, this is about new technology and how ITESOFT are changing and making a breakthrough in the accounts payable finance department with automation. A little bit of housekeeping for you today. Undoubtedly, people will have questions as we go through this webinar. So in the chat log, please put questions in through the chat log as you have them arise for yourself, and we will deal with these at the end. So we're going to mute all attendees from now on, so that the only way you'll be able to communicate is through the chat log. The rest of the team here will be able to pick that up. I do have another colleague with me, Rory, who is going to be taking you through the software itself when we get to that point. So with that, I believe we've got the vast majority of people who are actually on or just about to come on. What we're going to do from an agenda point of view for the next 40 odd minutes is to cover a number of points through this session. And what we're going to look at first is what's been happening in the market and where the market is likely to be going. And really that takes us nicely into the next agenda item, Streamline for Invoices, the actual product itself. We're going to be looking at two very specific areas within that. One is to do with the capture process, and the other is to do with, once you've captured an image, what do you do with that? So these tend to be two of the key areas that organizations are looking at and are looking for more information on. There are other aspects that we're going to touch on today, but we're not going to go into any more detail on around things like fraud and supplier portal capability. At the end of going through the overview of the product, I'm then going to hand over to Rory, who's going to take you through some scenarios in the software so you can get to see and feel it and understand how it works much better. Then he's going to hand back to me and I'll give you a little bit of information about who we are as a company, where we come from, and why we are experts in this and how we've come to create this breakthrough. I'll put questions at the end, but as I said at the start, questions are one of these aspects that tend to be context specific. So please put them in as we go through the webinar, and we will deal with these at the end, assuming that we have enough time. So on that basis, we're going to head straight off into what's happening in the marketplace and some feedback that we have had from various organizations. So there's really feedback that we've had from this, and this was from a survey that was done about just less than 18 months ago. There were a number of different areas that came back. Surprise, surprise, the top two are around how do we improve a process and how do we also automate or digitalize, modernize how you're currently manually operating to having a level of automation, robotic processing capability applied to that. That's still coming out as by far and away the biggest #1 area that organizations are still looking at. And that's because more and more invoices are coming through in multiple different formats, and how do you deal with this? We're going to dive into that in a little bit more detail as well later on. Interestingly enough though, down the bottom we have two others that were coming out. One of them was a little bit of a surprise, which was the fraud side of things, but it's something we've been looking at for a number of years. The other one is related back to how do we improve and put efficiency and effectiveness into processes, which is all about paper. Organizations are still struggling with how to get paper out of the business or to transform the business into new modern ways of being able to work. And this is all related, including the fraud piece, back to how do you change what you're doing to something that's different in a way that makes a real impact with the business. What we're going to look at now is e-invoicing. Now, we've split this into essentially two different sections or two different areas. All these companies that are above $1 billion in revenue and organizations that are under $1 billion in revenue. So that's on the top slide. And as you can see, as an average, organizations are achieving about 30% of e-invoicing. What does e-invoicing really stand for? What does it really mean? For most organizations, it means anything that's coming in electronic. Actually, in reality, that's EDI, so true electronic data transfer, or emails. So emails is not really proper true EDI in any shape or format, but for the purposes of this research that was completed, that falls within it as well. And you can see it's actually quite low. It's about 30% across the board. So for large organizations, we can see it's not too bad. They'll have a combination of emails coming in and true EDI, because they're large-scale organizations, probably with a number of suppliers that send in a huge number of invoices on a regular weekly, monthly basis. But for smaller organizations, it tends to be a huge issue. They're not really dealing with that, so they're actually reverting back to paper. The big impact that has for organizations is really looking at this next graph. We still have the same metric split in place, above and below $1 billion in revenue. But this is more focused specifically at how often do you have to touch an invoice. So that could be to resolve a problem in an invoice, it could be to validate an invoice, it could be to identify a supplier on an invoice, any touch that a human being needs to have with that invoice. And we can see on average that's at 70%. So it's really quite high. So if you think of the number of invoices that you have, so let's say you've got 100,000, just to make the numbers easy, that means 70,000 of your invoices are going to be touched by someone within your finance team. That creates a huge amount of time and effort and workload for them. Plus, how do you have any compliance and governance around that? So these are the sort of problems that we're having to really speak about in more detail and deal with for organizations. Another aspect that we're just going to touch on briefly, because of the change of purpose and way that organizations are looking to operate, is fraud. Now you can see down on the bottom or middle left-hand side of the screen, back in 2012, fraud was, roughly, of those who were or believed they were experiencing it, was about 60%. But within a very short space of time, 2 years, 2016, that's increased by a huge amount, almost 40%, up to 82%. So significant things are happening out there in the market with this. And a lot of this is being driven because of automation, because of digitalization. There's more and more companies who are being hit by fraud. And last year, towards the tail end, around about end of Q3, beginning of Q4, two very large, well-known companies, Facebook and Google, were hit by fraud that each of these were hit with $100 million for their companies. Now, the issue with fraud is it's really difficult to actually get money back once it's left your organization. So what we're looking at is how do you actually stop that happening, and how do you stop paying money to organizations when your likelihood of getting it back is really, really low. And really this is why we've brought together part of the breakthrough with accounts payable automation, where we're saying this needs to be dealt with in a joined up way. It can't be done piecemeal, it can't be done one or the other. So one way of looking at this is, and again, this is research based, 98% of your supplier spend, so think of how much you spend with your suppliers, that could be $500 million of spend, it could be $100 million of spend. 98% of that is relatively safe on average. 2% is likely to be fraud of some type. And there are many, many different types of areas where that can be created, both from an external perspective, and that could be as simple as they've sent in a duplicate invoice which you've paid or you've not identified. But there are many, many more aspects to that, and we're not going to go into any of these areas really today. But part of this is based because organizations are getting hit with invoices electronically on a regular basis, and from a finance point of view, you are legally obliged to pay that invoice unless you can prove that either you've not had the goods or it's not for yourselves. So you can deal with that, and historically most organizations deal with that by getting an audit company in who will retrospectively look at what you've spent, who you've spent it with, and match it all together. And that's not great because you've already spent the money. This is where we're looking at how do you put an automated process in place, combining that with fraud capability to stop fraud before it happens. And the new streamlined product has this all built into it as part of it. It's absolutely stunning and a breakthrough for it. So let's look at the high level AP process and the key areas for that. So what we have are, the first part to this is, how do you capture an invoice? Now you can see down here there are a number of different types or formats that you can get. So scan, that's going to be a paper invoice. That's relatively well known, relatively simple in the sense that you've got an invoice, what are you going to do with it? Other means are things like emails. We know lots of companies who get emails coming in, and that trend is growing and growing. But a lot of companies are actually going, well, we'll print it off because we have no way of being able to deal with that in an automated process. What about having to go out to other portals or going out to organizations to pull the invoices from them? Well, that takes time and effort, and that then means you're going to have more touch points for that. E-invoicing, EDI. So you have some organizations who will take pictures on their phones, like the iPhone at the bottom, and off it goes. And of course, you could also have a supplier portal of some type in there as well. So how do you deal with all these formats, different structures? If it's coming in by XML, if it's coming in by paper, if it's coming in by a photograph, if it's coming in by PDF, a Word document, do you really care? From our point of view, you just want to be able to capture that. You want to be able to have it as an electronic image, and then fundamentally what you're looking to be able to achieve from that is these invoices go straight from a capture point of view, get matched to who the supplier is, pull your PO data through, and then it gets ready to export out to your ERP system. From our point of view, we're not going to touch on the different types of ERP systems in place, but we deal with all of them pretty much. Right from Sage 200s up to the SAP and Oracles of the world. Now, for your non-PO invoices, we're back here. You've captured them, but we're not going to know where to go. So they're going to come to someone in AP. Someone's going to have to code them. They're probably going to have to put nominal codings against it as well, and then send it out into the business for approval. But let's go back up to here to your non-touch. What happens to your PO invoices where there are discrepancies? How do they get dealt with? Well, they need to go out on a workflow to get dealt with by the business to say, it could be a price discrepancy. Do we accept that price discrepancy? It could be something like unplanned carriage, happens a huge amount. And then all of that needs to go through your control metrics and your compliance and governance steps that you want to have in place so you have a full audit trail. As part of that, we have the analytics down the bottom, which allows a full end-to-end life cycle of where an invoice is, who's got it, what's happening with it. So these are the big blocks that you should be expecting to see and talk about in detail with any vendor that is looking to provide a modern breakthrough technology capability in the accounts payable team. How do you move the work from AP out into the business for the vast majority of the invoices you have coming in? And this is where, with the Streamline for Invoices, we're going to be looking at that in much more detail. Now, the first part of that we're going to look at is capture. And how is it, based on the agenda slide, that we're able to provide 3 times more the capture capability out there from the rest of the marketplace? So what are your options? If you go with a traditional on-premise solution, and by the way, we have that type of solution as well, so we know these types of issues and where organizations are coming from. You have to buy the software up front, you have to put it in place, you have to tweak it, you have to make alterations to it to configure it to your specific uniquenesses in the business. It takes time, effort, your IT resource, and think of your IT resource. How much spare capacity do they have when they've got lots of other projects on board? One of the key things we found when we were doing research on this, and we had that with some of our customers, is how often do you upgrade so that you're actually on the latest version, achieving the most modern capability that you can get using latest technology. So if you're on a few versions behind, and that generally tends to be standard within the industry, then you're missing out on additional benefits that you've already paid for. And of course, none of this deals with the capture piece around how do you get data off a piece of paper or an electronic image and be able to do something meaningful with it. So first line there, which says we're reaching, or organizations out there with traditional on-premise solutions are reaching somewhere between 35% to 50% extraction rates, which is absolutely appalling. Because what you're saying, best case scenario, is that you're going to get 1 piece of data out of 2 invoices coming through off that in an automated way. Now, part of that's down to things like, how good is your master data? When was the last time you cleaned that up? Do you have a team in place that regularly goes back and updates it, cleans it, and keeps it at a high level to get high capture rates? Of course you don't. I don't know any organizations that do. They might go in and clear up the master data when you're putting automation in place, but after that, that project's gone. That project team's gone. So how do you then tune your specific on-prem solution to get the best results out of it? It requires a team of experts who know what they're doing on a regular basis to do that. There's, generally for most organizations that don't have our software, there's no machine learning, there's no robotics in place. So how do you get to a reading rate from, say, 35%, which is what most organizations are getting, to almost 85%, which is essentially 3 times the number that you're getting with our type of solution? Let's look at this a slightly different way. For a lot of organizations, they're down here in this bottom left-hand corner, manual data entry. You're getting a lot of emails coming through that you're printing off. You're getting paper invoices coming in. And you're manually entering that information into your ERP. It could be a Sun ERP, it could be an Aggresso ERP, it could be Oracle ERP, it could be PeopleSoft. It makes no difference. You're having to put that in. And usually you're getting maybe, if you're lucky, 50 invoices a day per person into the system. Other options for being able to move from here are to, we've been talking about on-prem. You can do that and you get a good move forward in a lot of cases. Or you can go to a SaaS-based cloud OCR type capability. Well, that'll move you forward. We'll talk about the types of options around that in a minute, but it doesn't really move you very far forward. So we speak with lots of organizations who've actually said, you know what, this is a lot of work and effort. Let's outsource this. Let's put it to an outsourcer who will be able to take all the problems and we're sorted. Great, thanks very much. But actually, the underlying issues to do with your invoices of, who needs to prove this, has it been goods receipted, how do you deal with unplanned carriage and additional costs in the business, still have to be resolved by the business. So you're not dealing with the capture issues which are there. And this is where Streamline, which has capture as a service built into it, specifically as part of this capability, really makes a huge difference in the marketplace. And this is where it's a massive breakthrough in the capture capability. And we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail now. So this capture as a capability is a real game changer, because this is where we're using robotics machine learning capability out of the box. You guys don't need to worry about it at all. We as a company, ITESOFT, deal and manage that on an ongoing basis so that you are getting the best reading rates out of this possible. Now, if we look down here at some of the content on the bottom right hand side of the screen, we can see here where the mouse is that one of our customers is getting just under 92% on their data capture. That is phenomenal. There's no one else out there in the marketplace that is getting anywhere close to this type of capability. So why don't we just move across to look at our live platform at the moment. So this is our live platform of all the customers who are using our capture capability at the moment. You can see here, since the start of the year, we've had 2.3 million documents go through the system. And the average rate is just under 85%. Can you speak to your vendors that you're speaking with about putting modernization and automation in place and have them tell you what they're going to produce for you? If we look over here on the right hand side of the screen, we can see the trend is that that's going up. So that means your straight through processing rates are going to be higher and higher and higher over time because of what we're providing. Now, I'm not going to go into this in any more detail. When I hand over to Rory, he can go through some of the details in more detail at that stage. Part of the reason that we're able to achieve this is because what we have is a mutualized supplier database. So we have supplier details in the cloud that we're able to share and match against your suppliers as well. So if your master data is not in the best shape possible, that's absolutely fine. We will help out with that and we will augment that. If you're missing some master data, we probably have that as well. And this helps to achieve the highest levels of capture and reading and extraction rates out in the marketplace. And all of that is done by the ITESOFT team without you having to do anything with that. We manage that ongoing over time with yourselves. Job done. So you've captured an invoice, you've got it electronically, we've extracted the data from it. We now need to do something with that. And that's what we're going to look at now in terms of the process. So before we get into our specific process, we're going to just go back and look at some of the issues out in the marketplace. We're going to look at essentially two elements to it. One is on-premise again, and the other one is SaaS-based solutions that are out there. We're not going to bother about the BPO scenario at the moment because we don't deal with that. And actually, we don't believe you need to, because the scanning is so simple and easy for organizations to do nowadays. And we automatically deal with the emails, and we'll come on to that in a little bit. But from an on-premise point of view, it takes time, effort to set up. And more specifically, it takes more time and effort to be able to get your specific business rules that you want to have that make your business special put in place. And then you're running behind on the versions. How do you actually move from the workflow that you've currently got, which will be built in a very specific language in-house? Generally, it tends to be very technical and therefore difficult to deal with, usually hand-coded into your system. All issues that we come across on a regular basis. Your other option is, well, go out and get a SaaS-based solution, but the problem with them is they tend to be very basic. The workflows in them tend to be very defined, and therefore you can't do anything outside of that. So anything that's unique and special for yourselves that makes your business unique, you can't apply. And of course, how do you then tie that back to your ERP at the back end, which is fundamentally the most important aspect to this? So these are huge issues and options out in the marketplace that need to be properly understood by yourselves and the impact that they will have when you're moving to this type of modern capability. Let's look at what we're providing with Streamline. The key thing with what we're providing here is our solution is based on business process management capability. It's low code. What does that actually mean for yourselves? It has huge amounts of flexibility for you. Nothing is hard coded. It's all based on writing a business rule, which is really very simple. This BPM capability is based on a universal industry accepted standard called Notation 2.0. It's just a technical language, that's all, no biggie. That means it's got a huge amount of flexibility to then achieve your matrix level, the number of sign-off levels that you need to have all the capability that you want to apply to how you want to run your business for the governance and control aspects that you want to put in place. That then means that as you want to be able to slightly alter your process over time, you want to add users into it, it's very simple, it's very easy. And as you can see on the top right hand side of the screen, it's recognized by all the major analysts out there in the marketplace. Let's talk about the integration side of things a little bit more, because your finance system is incredibly important to how you can achieve high levels of straight-through processing and achieve your business case, which is fundamentally what you're trying to achieve. So, out of the box, we've got three biggest ERP suppliers in the marketplace out there: Oracle, SAP, and Microsoft. There are many more, and we have connections into all of these. But the key thing about this is, if you've got business rules in these ERPs and others, we can reuse that information. So tolerances, for instance, we'll take the tolerances that you've got in these ERPs and reuse that as part of the process when you want to send things out into the marketplace. That's really important so that we can, you've got all your information in one place rather than having to recreate it in multiple places, and your cost of ownership with our solution drops dramatically. I'm not going to talk about this in any more detail at this moment in time. What I would like you and encourage you to do at this moment is to put any questions you have in place so that you can put them in now while you've got them. I'm now going to hand across to Rory, who is going to take you through the software. Now, we're not going to do anything on the capture piece at this moment in time, because, what would you see? If we were scanning an invoice, we're going to start with some invoices that have come into the solution initially. So, Rory, over to yourself.
Thank you very much, Alan. Right, let's just get it up. Can you see the screen?
Yeah, we can see the screen.
Perfect. So, today we're going to go through a couple of ways of processing invoices in Streamline. Okay, so I'm going to log in as Sarah, who is a fictional accounts payable character for a company called Acme. So I'm going to log in. And as you can see, Sarah's got 5 tasks to do, and there are currently 7 invoices on the platform. So if we go to the current invoices, we can see 2 of them have exported straight through. These are your straight through invoices, where we've been able to identify the supplier, read all the values, validate all the information, and export it to the finance system ready for payment. As you can see down here, this one's been flagged as a duplicate invoice. Now we can see, if we look, that it is identical to this invoice here. So if we go back to Sarah's homepage and we look at her tasks, first of all, we're going to check out this duplicate. Now, we want to reject this because we don't want to pay it twice. So we're going to hit reject at the bottom. It's a duplicate invoice, which it already knows. And we're going to type duplicate and reject. And that goes back out for the business for them to do with it what they please. Okay, so next, we are going to try to look at an invoice with a purchase order. So here we have an invoice from RS Components. Now, it's managed to match it to a purchase order. However, there is a price discrepancy. Now, for those with very keen eyes will notice there's a quantity discrepancy here. So we've ordered 300 bootlaces, but they've delivered 100. So it's as simple as changing this number here to 100. And then we ask the stethoscope at the bottom to double check everything, and we get a smiley face. So we can approve it, and it's ready to pay. Okay, so now we're going to have a look at this invoice here. If we process this, it's telling us there's a discrepancy of £97.55. So what we want to do here is we want to reject this back to the supplier and notify them that there's a discrepancy. So we can reject it, and we type in discrepancy and reject. And that's gone back out to the supplier. Okay, so now we're going to look at the last invoice with a purchase order. So we've got another invoice from RS Components. It's noticed that it can find a purchase order reference, but there's no actual number for it to pick up. So I need to match it now as accounts payable to the purchase order. So if I click on the alert down here, it takes me to the right place. I press the plus button, and then I'm going to add the lines from the purchase order that I need. And I'm going to change the quantity here because, again, they've only delivered 50 bootlaces and I've ordered 200. So I'll change that to 50. What you could also do if, for example, you've got an OPO, no pay policy, you could reject it back to the supplier and say unknown purchase order, and then they'll resend it with a purchase order for it to go straight through. Okay, so I'm going to approve this. And lastly, we're going to check out this invoice here without a purchase order. So as accounts payable, I now need to code this invoice to the account and department. So this is relatively easy. I need to pick an account. So I know I need to match it to the raw materials account. This is as simple as typing in a keyword like a Google search. So I type in raw and hit enter, and there it is. And my department is production unit. So again, if I ask the stethoscope at the bottom, he's all happy, and we can approve it. That's not the end for that invoice though. So what we're going to do is we're going to log in as another user, James, who in this workflow is the financial controller. Now he gets to take a look at this invoice before it goes out to the final approver, just to make sure that accounts payable have done their job properly. So we're going to take a look here. He's all happy with the coding, but what he could do is he could split it. So for example, if I wanted to charge it to 2 different cost centers, I could then change this amount, hit the plus, it adds a new line for the remaining amount, and I can change the department. That will send the invoice out for parallel approval, so 2 approvers can view it at the same time, and then it's a lot quicker than passing a piece of paper around, as I'm sure you can imagine. We're not going to do that here though, because it's a little timely to demonstrate, as I'm sure you can imagine, so we're going to approve that. Now it's gone out to its final approver, which is Jason. Jason's the production manager, as you can see. He's got a task to do when he logs in, and it's the same invoice. Jason's completely happy to pay this invoice. If it was out for parallel approval, he could open this chat box here and have a conversation with the other approver, make sure that they're both paying the right amount. Yeah, and that's all real time. All the chat log is saved with the invoice, and you can actually see the history of the invoice, so you can see what's been done automatically and what's had to have manual intervention. So we're going to hit approve. All right, and that's streamlined for invoices. So what we can do whilst we're here is take a look at some of the reporting modules that we can deliver with the product. So here we can see This is just a sample of a day's usage, so it's not going to be huge volumes. But as you can see, we've received 99 invoices, 68 of which are in process, 28 of which have been paid and they're fine, and 3 of which have been rejected. And you can drill this down by your department. R&D, for example, they've got 3 invoices not yet paid. You can check out all of these statistics. It goes into a lot of detail, but we're going to move on. This report is quite useful if you've got payment terms set up with certain suppliers. You can see which ones are near their time limit, so you don't have to pay a fine or you don't end up basically upsetting your suppliers. And again, this can be drilled down by service. And you can see all the invoices here that are overrunning or about to overrun. Also useful if you've got a particular push towards purchase orders in your organization. Here you can see we're running at 74% with PO, which is quite good. And again, by department, you can see any of the reasons for not having POs all come up by a supplier. Yeah, it's all very interesting. You can also see disputes as well. So if you've got invoices in dispute, if we're waiting for credit notes, things like that, we can see the outstanding financial obligation. We can see how many invoices are involved, what departments, what the errors are. And we can also see across the board our recognition rate. So 87%, that's decent. Anything over 80% is really good. And you can see our reading rate is at 90% as well. You can drill this down by supplier. So there you go, 83% supplier identification. And you can drill it down by field. So for example, the date. It's reading 93% of the dates. Excellent. So there's lots and lots of stats here. It's quite easy to add your own. So if you've got any specific reports that you want to see, best and worst performers, particular KPIs per individuals, for example, it's quite straightforward to add. So that's Streamline in a nutshell. And I'll pass you back to Mr. Brown.
Excellent. Thanks, Rory. That was fantastic. Hopefully that has given yourselves a bit of a feel for what we have as a product. It goes into some detail for you, in that, but really, the whole point of that is so you can get a look and feel and an understanding of how it works. Rory's gone into some of the reporting and metrics on that, which are really important for most organizations. As you can see up here, we've got a huge amount of analytics as part of the product, which is exactly what we need to be providing you as part of the business case. You want to buy a product and go, how is it performing over time? So we are experts in how to provide this type of capability. We have all of this built in as standard within the tool. All the data is available for your ability to report any of that out. You can create new reports as you need it, specifically for your organization, and that then means you can create all the information that you need to achieve for both the reputation of your organization, to be able to show how well you're performing, and how you can create capability within the team. Any questions on this, please put them into the chat log as we're going through, because I'm aware we're running out of time already. And what we're now going to look to go into is just really to be able to cover off what Streamline is, just as a very quick summary for you as part of that. So ITESOFT has an on-premise capability as well at one end of the solution. We also have a SaaS-based cloud solution capability. So we know what the issues are to do with the solutions that are out there in the marketplace at the moment. Okay, so this is why we have specifically created and brought out Streamline, because it doesn't deal with, or these other solutions really don't deal with things like the automation aspects. As I showed on the platform results, we're processing in excess of 2.3 million invoices since the beginning of the year. So what you've seen on the system is that we're getting automation rates in excess of 85% per million invoices per calendar month. That's huge. No one else is getting that, and I would very much urge you to take that up and question other vendors that you're speaking with about this. As standard within the product, you get machine learning, robotics, AI, neural networking. That's stuff that we've been doing for the last 10 plus years. Okay, so this is brand new capability out in the marketplace. You don't need IT capability to deal with this. We provide that for you. It's a fully managed, fully hosted solution so that you can just deal with your invoices, deal with your suppliers. We haven't touched really in any detail supplier portal here. If you'd like more information on that, please put that in as a question through the chat log, and the team will pick that up and get back to you individually about it. So what I'm going to do now is just provide a little bit of information about who we are to put the context around about why we are so good at this. So the company's been around since 1984. That's in excess of 30 odd years. The only thing that we do is document processing. So that's how do you take a paper document or a document in any format, how do you digitalize that and capture that document in any format, go, there's an image that you can read and extract data out of that and move it through your organization. We do that 100% of the time. That is our business. So the revenue figure that you see up there, all in excess of 30 million for 2016, that's all done from accounts payable, order to cash, purchase to pay, etc. This is our business. This is why we understand what we're trying to do with this. We have in excess of 600 clients who use this product globally. And you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, there are some company names up here that are using the product that hopefully you will recognize some of them. Companies like Hermes, companies like Poly1, Jaguar Land Rover, big, large, corporate, well-known organizations who've been in this exactly the same position as yourself, were looking to make a big change with how they were dealing with invoices. So to be the market leader globally in this space, we put a huge amount of money back into our R&D function to come up with the next generation of capability. We've been doing robotics for 10 years. We just haven't been necessarily talking about it in that sense. It's only been in the last 6 to 9, maybe 12 months that people have been talking about robotics, machine learning, robotic process automation, etc. Well, they're just getting on board with that. We've been doing it for years. Again, I urge you to put questions in because we've now come to the end of the time. So while we've got your attention, put any questions in. If we're not able to answer them right now, we will deal with them individually at the end of the session. So we have actually come to the end of the time. Thank you very much for your time. We will deal with your questions that you sent in at the end. Enjoy the rest of your day and look forward to speaking with you soon. Thank you very much.